8:05, and we'll continue to let people in as we get started. And we're going to turn it over to Chris to go forward now. So everybody, please welcome Chris Bain.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for tuning in this evening. There goes a mute. Thanks again. I'm Chris Bain. I'm the president of the Cow Neck Peninsula Historical Society here in Port Washington. As in my earlier presentations, I'd like to thank the good folks at Landmark on Main Street for hosting these Zoom presentations, especially Laura Mogul, Kelly Rentz-Bruno, and Sean Perry. They make it all happen. I'd also like to thank the people who took me up on my offer in November to join the society or renew their subscriptions. I sent them each several of our recent journals along with our thanks. If you too would like a few journals, just visit our website in January and make a donation of any size whatsoever. And as long as I have an address for you, I will send you something nice. Your support of our town's historical society, as well as Landmark on Main Street, is truly appreciated and never taken for granted. Each of our websites has numerous ways that you can support these historic institutions. You'll hear the name of John Whitmer a bunch of times tonight as I identify his photographs taken and dated in the first decade of the 20th century, such as this photograph, taken on Congressman Burke Cochran's beach in November of 1906. And if you missed my November presentation on the origins of Main Street School, which was also a history of all the schools leading up to Main Street School, you can watch it and listen to that on our website, cowneck.org. Okay, we're going to start with this map from 1906 as we follow the shoreline from Plandome to Sands Point and then around to Bar Beach. Sometimes we'll be out on the water, and sometimes we'll check out historic features and buildings that hug the shore. We'll pass by the yacht clubs, the town dock area, the Mill Pond Historic District, a touch of Manhasset Isle and Manor Haven, and then around the points. Sands Point will only lightly be discussed since I'll be doing a standalone presentation on May 16th titled Sands Point, Known and Unknown. By the way, you should all know the many points of land that mark Cow Neck Peninsula. So let's start over here. Here is about where the town dock is. This is Tom's Point, Plum Point, Barker's Point, Sands Point, Prospect Point, and Mott's Point. You're going to get to know them a little bit better tonight. So let's get started. This is a postcard, an aerial from, I think, the early 1960s. This was the center of town for many of tonight's images. So let me just point out some of the most recognizable points of interest. Here, obviously, we have the town dock, very easy to see. And Sunset Park over here with the ball field. I'm not sure if the Sousa bandshell has been built yet here. It was built in 67, so this might be 66, 65, somewhere along that line. Then if you come up here on the right side, a little bit of the Mill Pond, the Indian restaurant Diwan is here, and this has a dock that is long gone, so I'm not sure how early this might be. But if you continue up here across the street, for those of you that might not have been in Port Washington in decades, is the Lewis Oil Tanks, which is now a Stop and Shop supermarket, along with a few other stores. If you continue down, there's the familiar Big Lawn at Thompson Industries. Over here, we would have Bay Bowl and McCrory's over here for you real old timers that know Port Washington. Sheets Creek here, Sousa up here, and across Manor Haven Boulevard, you get to Manor Haven Park. I'm not sure the pool was built here yet. It might be, that might be the pool. But if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, there's a blue pool at Knickerbocker. So there's no blue water there, but that's still something to figure out. But the beach is there, Manor Haven Beach, and then you get down to all the marinas, Capri and the Rivieras over here. This just I want to situate you a little bit. And over here, of course, on Manhasset Isle are the hangars that Pan Am flew the Clippers out of to Europe. And we're going to talk a little bit about that Tom's Point condo complex here and more marinas. But we're going to start up here. This bird's eye view from the Long Island Railroad Bridge, which was finished and first used in 1898. That's the beginning of Manhasset Bay, with Great Neck on the left and the beginning of the Cow Neck Peninsula in Manhasset on the right, heading north toward Port Washington. Now remember that all the historic images tonight were really black and white, since color photography was many decades in the future. However, the hand coloring of postcards, usually at the printing plant in Germany, was very popular. So whenever you see a beautiful image like this, it was hand colored by someone who really didn't know what color the houses were, so they just picked a few colors. The Long Island Railroad extended the branch from Great Neck to Port Washington, which involved building the new steel bridge over the Manhasset Valley. It's still the highest bridge in the Long Island Railroad system. The first trip to Port Washington was June 23rd, 1898. And I will advocate that this was easily the most consequential day in the history of Port Washington. That's when commuting started. This is the Plandome Mill. This is the next photograph by John Whitmer, whose collection of photographs, negatives, and notebooks are housed at the Historical Society. According to his notebook, this image was taken on December 1st, 1912. The Society has a historic recognition program headed up by trustee Ross Lumpkin. And since those will be the subject of the next presentation in March, I'll save the details of the Plandome Mill for then. We'll move on to the first Port Washington Yacht Club. It was founded as the Port Washington Club in 1905 by 19 charter members. The initial initiation fee was $10, with dues of $20 a year. You can see the sandbanks behind the buildings, since neighborhoods hadn't been developed in that area of Port Washington yet. This was their next building, which had several expansions itself. The little bathing cabins can be seen off to the left side. It's really a beautiful shot. There was a yacht anchorage that was shared by both the Port Washington Yacht Club and Manhasset Bay Yacht Club. You'll see numerous houseboats in some of the images tonight, since they were far more popular in Port Washington than they are today. This is the launch. Probably dropped somebody off at their boat. It's heading back to Manhasset Bay Yacht Club. This is Manhasset Bay Yacht Club over here. Here's our first full view of the Manhasset Bay Yacht Club. It was founded in 1891 as an outgrowth of the Douglaston Yacht Club. The first clubhouse was built about the turn of the century. This is it you're looking at. Now turn your attention to this staircase right here and the lattice work underneath the porch along here. If you were on those stairs and you descended to the bottom and then you look to the right, this is what you'd see. Here's the lattice over here, and this is the rest of the docks, mostly small docks. This is actually the first view we're getting of Knickerbocker Yacht Club here, probably under construction. As a matter of fact, it looks like they are digging pilings with this drill here. This is the second and current clubhouse, a Georgian Revival brick building, which was built in 1929. They've since, of course, added a pool and other things, but the building looks pretty much like that. It's a really beautiful structure. Now, it's important to point out that across the street from the Manhasset Bay Yacht Club was the anchorage, shown here when it was a popular rooming house. Originally, it was built in 1770 as the homestead of John Mitchell, who owned about 100 acres in that area. Our society published a terrific book on that area called Historic Mitchell Farms, written by George Williams. It's a trove of information for that area. Now, between the yacht club and the anchorage was the terminus for the trolley. The trolley the Port Washington short-lived trolley, seen here. Between 1908 and 1920, the trolley ran semi-regularly every few hours from Port Washington to Roslyn and on to Mineola and then back again. They had several, and they had switch outs so that they could stop and pause while the northbound waited for the southbound. And they had these overhead cantilever electrical wires. Next up the shoreline was the Knickerbocker Yacht Club, originally organized about 1874 in New York City before moving to College Point in 1891, and then to Port Washington in 1907.
I did. I muted it off.
The original building shown here was erected in 1907, and its distinctive 1/3 window can be seen in all the photographs of it from the bay. This entire building was later lifted to become the second floor of a larger clubhouse. There's the 1/3 windows there. Beautiful hand-colored shot. They always were very careful about how much paint to use, but this has way more color than most of the hand-colored postcards you'll see. The club closed in 2008 due to declining membership, and there's a large condominium complex on the spot now that shares the Knickerbocker name. There were a number of boat yards in this area, large and small. The largest and most notable one was the Purdy Boat Company, who built a variety of beautiful commuter yachts and speedboats for such notable families as Vanderbilt, Whitney, Mullen, Guggenheim, and their backer, of course, land developer Carl Fisher, who developed not only Montauk, but Miami. Here's their 1924 express cruiser named Shadow, 56 feet long, and seen here moored alongside the Purdy docks by Bayview Colony. However, in 1937, they built what many consider to be the most beautiful commuter yacht ever, Aphrodite. Actually, this was Aphrodite 3. This is my photograph, which I shot in the late 80s for Nautical Quarterly magazine. If you're interested in boat building and restoration, get yourself a copy of a wonderful book called The Many Lives of Aphrodite by Alan Dinn, local historian who tells the story like nobody else because he's in the Purdy family. A&R Marshall was another significant presence on the waterfront. Known as one of the largest and most successful marine supply stores on the entire Atlantic seaboard, with a huge yard holding more than 100 boats each winter. Here's a shot by John Whitmer taken in one such yard on November 18th, 1906. Preceding most of the larger boat yards were small ones with their own docks and small staffs. This was Ryder's Dock, with a popular beach for cooling off in the summer. In December, actually on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1900, John Whitmer's father posed for this photograph on the mast of the frigate Tennessee, which was beached here. A Captain Elbert Stannard purchased much of the rest of the Mitchell property in 1887 and lived in that homestead before it became the Anchorage rooming house. Stannard purchased old warships and stripped them for their metal fittings, their wood, and whatever else could be resold. This was part of his crew, not exactly a scene that you'd associate with our rather genteel Port Washington. Here's the good ship Emily Wells on Stannard's Beach in 1902. Well, she isn't a very good ship by this time, clearly, but Stannard made a very good living recycling parts of such ships. I have no idea where he got them or how he got them to Port Washington. On the road, this shows a slice of time with a beautiful white horse pulling a carriage and about to pass one of those newfangled automobiles. The house behind the trees was that of Lorenzo Smull, local builder who built Main Street School, amongst many other buildings in town. The house on the left became a doctor's sanatorium for many years. This panorama view of the same block is close to where Louis would eventually be. There's a dock on the left, just out of the photo, shown here. This is a happy group of people on the dock, waving to the photographer, who's on the next dock. Here's the close-up of them. It's always possible that some of these happy people have descendants who live here in town, but we'll never know. Speaking of happy people, this beautifully hand-tinted postcard shows about 7 happy people chest deep in the water while 4 women watch from a short distance away. Note the woman in the white bathing cap. Now she and a few of her friends have joined in the fun, so everyone's happy. Well, they must be happy because the card says so right up top here. Everybody's happy. It's great. Seriously, it's very rare to see 2 postcards taken within a few minutes of each other. In fact, in our collection of between 250 and 300 Port Washington postcards, I've never seen anything like this. Louis' Care Killer. This pen and ink illustration by Eric Miola, one of many wonderful illustrations commissioned by the Kurz Oil Company in the early 70s for their annual calendar. The Care Killer was owned and run by the Zwirline family. It was a floating bar and a restaurant, the predecessor to Louis'. This 1929 ad in the Port News lists their address as simply the town dock. And this may be the first land-based Louis'. It is certainly one of our top 10 postcards from Port's early shoreline. Meanwhile, across the street, this card appears to have been mailed on August 15th, 1908, said right up here. There are no trolley tracks, so the image is probably a year or 2 earlier. We're approaching the Port Washington Hotel, which by that time was already known as Bradley's, named after John Bradley, the owner and proprietor. He bought it in about 1900. Bradley or his predecessor built a little dock before the town did. A few kids are in the foreground, probably with a fishing line. The town of North Hempstead claimed the land as its own and built a much larger public dock sometime around 1905 to 1908, which became known later as the town dock. If you went out on the end of this dock, let's say out about here, and turned back and looked back in this direction, this was the view you would have seen. There's Lorenzo Small's house again, and a few little structures, but this was a beach. Many town kids learned to swim or simply wade on this beach. In a similar view, though far more romantic, showing the Custom House, which was an informal, tongue-in-cheek name of a hangout for clam diggers, fishermen, sportsmen, and the occasional yachtsman. We have 2 versions of this card. The next one shows some young man's attempt to coax a young lady to come out for a visit. How about Friday night? This is where you belong. I love that. It's so hokey. This view shows the proximity of the Custom House to Bradley's. Beautiful sailboat here. Here's Bradley's, and here's the Custom House. A great view of the public dock. Across the bay, you can see Manhasset Isle over here. It was known as O'Gorman's Island at the time. The sandbanks were still being dug out and sent by barge to New York City until the late 20s. This is a beautiful and rare card that we just recently acquired, showing the town dock as it was slowly becoming known. But you can see the trolley tracks. So this is after 2008. Here's the tracks right across here. They help you date a lot of the shots.
Yeah.
Before long, a pavilion was added. You can also see that at the end of the dock, there appears to be a ramp for the launching of small boats, which would have been far more convenient than a sandy or muddy beach. This is just a sweet little vignette from the side of the dock. This pen and ink drawing by John Miola, one of about 25 framed illustrations which the Kurz family kindly donated to the society. Here's a detail showing the quality of the work. The entire collection of these amazing illustrations done by John Miola and William Galloway can be viewed on our website. Just go to About Us, Our Collection, Kurz Collection. We have short bios of both artists, but if anyone has any additional information on either of these talented artists or photographs of them, please send them to me. Taking a look back toward Bradley's from the pavilion with a bunch of boys either taking a swim or mugging for the photographer. Here's a small group portrait with a billboard for Bradley's in the background. Steaks, chops, broilers, rare bits, and game in season. I had to look up rare bits, and I learned that it was also known as Welsh rabbit, though it's a meatless dish of cheese sauce over toast and a staple of British pub food, often paired with a pint of ale. Never had it. The new dock. Our last view of the dock, taken from about where the Sousa bandshell stands to this day. But of course, Sunset Park didn't exist yet. This photograph is amongst my favorite finds in our archive. It shows Lower Main Street, or Flower Hill Avenue as it was named then, before Sunset Park, when the water came right up to the road. There's no park. This is just low tide. Here's a clam shack. In fact, we liked this shot so much, we put it on the cover of our journal 5 years ago. In a minute, I'll show you these two buildings right here. These are really important on Lower Main Street. One was our first real bank, and one was our first real post office, and one was a general store. The bank and the post office were combined in this building. The boats got hauled out every winter onto that little beach. Remember that many people still made a decent living from shellfishing, clams, oysters, lobsters, all from local waters, and out in the Sound, obviously. Now, this is an important photograph by John Whitmer, taken on October 26, 1907. It shows the shoreline a few years before the land was filled in, creating Sunset Park. I've labeled the buildings, starting with the Van Nostrand General Store over here, then the bank and post office here, and these two windows here. This little building is still there, believe it or not. Bradley's is over here, and Lorenzo Small's house is up here. But the two on the left are worthy of a closer look. The Van Nostrand General Store, which also served for many years as the post office before the building next door was built, shown here with their horse-drawn delivery wagon. The sign over the door advertises William Van Nostrand, groceries, paints, oils, and varnishes. It shows you what was important in those days. Then the building just to the right, where they were waiting for the mail, is another important picture, showing the structure that was built as the town's first official post office on the left side, and the first bank, the Bank of North Hempstead, on the right side. It's post-1908 since the trolley tracks can be seen, heading to the curve around the post office. You can often spot these buildings from a distance in other postcards. This one, for instance, has the 6 windows across the front and the 2 little dormers up top. And you can see them clearly on this card. Once you pick out that building, you realize that Sunset Park isn't built yet, and you know basically where you are. This is simply a beautiful shot, showing the shoreline slightly to the right of our last image, even before Bradley's little dock. So it might be pre-John Bradley, actually, probably shot around 1895 or so. This 1911 pre-Sunset Park image by John Whitmer has a lot to unpack. First is the Seaman and Crooker clam shack in the left foreground. On the opposite shore, you can spot the roofline of the Hotel Renwick right here, which became D1 and many other things. And we'll get over there in a few minutes. There's also a long lost dock going out here with a sign for Baxter Estates right here. So it was probably when they were developing the Baxter farm into Baxter Estates. There's the Hotel Renwick again across the way. This is our last pre-sunset view, very well hand-colored. Here's that same house, the post office and bank here, and Van Nostrand's General Store, except now there's a park here. The Water Pollution Control District, commonly referred to as the Sewer District, was established in 1915, and the first sewage treatment plant was established here, where Sunset Park would be built in 1916. Landfill was brought in to create most of what we see here. Bradley's can be seen off to the right. Here's an undated shot of Sunset Park from the dock. Bradley's again can be seen on the far right, and I have no idea what this building is on the far left. And I have no idea what these funny little symbols. I've got funny little symbols all over my screen, which I don't know whether you have or not, but they're there, and we're going to live with them because I don't know how they are getting there. Here's the little building that has had many lives over the decades, including a thrift shop. It's currently the home of the Chamber of Commerce. Here's an assortment of boats apparently stored afloat for the winter. Some of them look less than afloat. A few appear to be half sunken, in fact. More interesting is the view of Manhasset Isle, which is already being mined for the sand. You can see how it's been leveled out near Tom's Point, but there's still work to be done toward the right. And speaking of winter, Manhasset Bay would freeze over almost every year, and there was quite a fleet of ice boats that would race from all the yacht clubs. And yes, that's a car on the ice. They still did it back then. It looks like they were having a great day, almost like a summer picnic. Now, the two guys way over there on the right, they look like they were hired hands. They're just sort of standing closely at attention. And the guy on the left who drove his car out into the middle of the frozen Manhasset Bay looks like he's quite warm in his fur coat. I wasn't at first going to show this one, taken on March 13, 1912, because John Whitmer missed the focus of the four men. He was focused behind them. But when you enlarge it, you'll notice the windows over here of the new Knickerbocker Yacht Club. And over here, you see Main Street School, only 3 years old. And speaking of ice, nearby kids are seen here skating on the Baxter Pond. Many of you and I skated on that pond as a young boy, though we all knew it as the Duck Pond back then. This image of the Baxter house shows the property fenced in, so I'm guessing that's when the farm was just about to be developed into Baxter Estates. Now, I'm not going to discuss the mill pond in depth tonight, since I covered that several months ago in my first of these Zoom presentations. However, I'd be remiss in not showing this image and a couple of others that you haven't seen. This photograph from 1881 may be the oldest photograph tonight. Originally, this roadway across here didn't exist. And the bay came all the way up to the Dodge homestead. It was known as Dodge's Inlet, as a matter of fact. Actually, few townsfolk, if they were over here and they needed to get over to here, they would have to walk around the entire inlet. The roadway, called a mill dam, was built in 1795, largely so that a Mr. Cornwall could build a tidal grist mill to grind local crops such as corn and wheat into flour. At various points, there were buildings on both sides, the inside and the outside of the resulting pond, such as a blacksmith shop shown here in the foreground. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You can clearly see Cornwall's mill here and this passageway between the two buildings. The big water wheel that's on this side can't be seen. So we're going to walk between this passageway to the right of the mill, and at low tide, turn around and look back to see what the water wheel looks like from the far side. Let's go. Okay, we came out of here, we jumped down, turned around. Here's the wheel. This is the mill dam. Now it's April of 1901, about the time the mill fell out of use. It was then used by McKee's General Store for storage. Now, if we turn and look to our left, we see the backs of some of the other buildings, along with massive piles of what appears to be sand over here and gravel. Sand mining had started on our peninsula in 1865 and was a thriving local industry, which we'll see in a few minutes. But now let's look back at the water wheel. It was known as, the mill was known as the Red Mill, and we'll walk back toward the left side, clamber over that rock wall foundation, and up through between the buildings again. When we get to the middle of the road again, let's turn to the right and see what we see. This is the mill on the right, of course, and there appears to be a man here with his horse, probably dropping off a crop for the grist mill to do its thing. Next is the Hyde Bicycle Shop in yellow, and straight ahead is Thomas McKee's General Store, which was the first store in Port Washington in 1850, back when it was known as Cow Neck. On the left, on the inside of the pond, was Wilkinson's Fish Market. In fact, let's walk over to here, to Wilkinson's Fish Market, turn around and look at the mill one more time before we push on. This shot from September 1908 shows the three men in the foreground right next to the water wheel, plus two men walking north on Shore Road. One appears to be a doctor carrying his medical bag, probably making a house call. And notice here, we'll see this metal structure again. This was a conveyor belt, a trestle, which went over the road to take sand to the waiting barges to take them into the city. But let's just follow up to about where these guys are now, and we'll see the Hotel Renwick at the corner. A familiar shape to anyone who knows Port Washington. Built as the Grapevine Hotel, it burned to the ground in the late 1890s and was rebuilt as the Hotel Renwick. I've never seen a picture of the Grapevine Hotel. There must be one someplace. But for almost 40 years, it was Gildo's, or Gildo's, depending on who you ask, and then a series of different names as it kept changing hands in the 80s and 90s when many of us were here. For many years, it has been Diwan, a wonderful Indian restaurant. Here's another view from slightly further up the shore, probably taken from the top of a ship's mast. The new Sands Point School can be seen in the distance, raining over the mill pond way up here. And the mill pond is going from here through here and back. Now, this image confused me for years since I assumed it was the town dock. However, I never saw the wing-like structures out on the end. Under high magnification, I realized that those buildings across the cove at the far left side were the buildings across from where Sunset Park would be built. Here they are named, and you all know them quite well now. So under high magnification, you can see the two wings of these of the pier are for loading sand onto waiting barges. In fact, you can just make out rail tracks over here, which makes sense since much of the sand on both sides of the peninsula was moved around by small narrow gauge railway systems. So our theory is that this pier may predate the trestle that was constructed later and went over the road. This photograph may even have been taken from the second floor of the hotel. More research is certainly needed, utilizing old maps, other photographs, and the like. One final look at the Hotel Renwick with its very dapper-looking Cappy Thatcher, proprietor, shown in the corner. Although the porch on the first floor has long since been enclosed, the second floor porch is still a wonderful place to enjoy a late spring lunch, dining at D1. Now let's look to the left and look down the shoreline a little bit. All that's left of the old mill. Other than the photographs taken by John Whitmer between 1900 and 1915, which I've identified, all the rest of tonight's images are long lost to history as far as the photographer goes. This large tidal mill was built by Adam Mott in 1781, and it was later purchased by Henry Cox. They both ground flour for local consumption and also to be sent by boat to New York City. It operated until 1884 when it broke down and was abandoned. It was finally torn down in 1910. This was about where Stop and Shop is now, and if you haven't been in town a long time, if you remember the Lewis oil tanks, this is pretty much across the street from where they were. When John Whitmer captured this photograph in 1906, this was truly all that's left of the old mill. This is a view of the shore just past the mill, basically where Stop and Shop is today and where the Lewis oil tanks used to be. The road is fortified and supported by tree trunks, and there appear to be two people approaching a meeting here and here. So let's zoom in a little bit. Here the photographer caught a chance encounter. The man on the left awaiting who? A sister, a friend, potential what? We'll never know. Notice the picket fence on the other side of the road, however. If the couple met and looked back at where the woman had come from, this is Shore Road. This would have been their view. Barely visible under magnification is the Hotel Renwick way over here in the distance. And the mill dam that at one point went all the way across to Manhasset Isle had been dismantled by 1906. And speaking of Manhasset Isle, there might be some people here who live at Tom's Point. So let me give you a picture of Tom's Point. Manhasset Isle. This was the point back in 1906. Now, aviation, of course, was a huge part of Port's shoreline and employment for many decades. However, I'm only going to give it a slight mention tonight since we have a complete program on the subject on April 15th, given by noted author Bill Blyer, who worked for Newsday for years and years. This postcard shows one of the first companies to invest in land for a seaplane base. Sadly, it was 1929, and come October, the world changed. Here's another beautiful illustration by John Miola showing the Yankee Clipper at Port Washington in 1937. With a wingspan of 152 feet and a top speed of 210 miles an hour, these were amongst the largest planes built in their day. They were Boeing 314 flying boats. Pan Am bought 12 of them. Just imagine these taking off from Manhasset Bay once a week and landing once a week. Someone needs to mute themselves, please, because I'm hearing some other voices in the distance. Thank you. Bermuda. They flew first to Bermuda and then to Europe via two different routes that were tested for more than a year. Here are a few quick aerial views. This one showing Yankee Clipper just after landing in the bay, right here. You can see the two large buildings, and I believe a plane would land and then taxi up to this dock right here, where it would offload its passenger and crew to this hangar. Now, if you're over on this side, looking outwards, you're looking out at the two buildings. The timing could be a little bit different because there's no dock going out. So this could be earlier or later. You can see Plum Point clearly right here, and even Kings Point on tip of Great Neck here. The crew. This was the Pan Am crew. There was a southern route from Port Washington to Marseille, France, via the islands in the Azores and then Lisbon, Portugal. The Dixie Clipper passenger service started with this crew on June 28th, 1939. This was their first flight. There was also a northern route to Southampton, England, via New Brunswick and Newfoundland, Canada, and Foynes, Ireland, flying the Yankee Clipper. The planes often had to be hauled up into the hangar for maintenance, but you can see the mammoth size of these. These hangars were where the passengers were checked in, showing their tickets. Upon their return flight, custom agents made them check their passports. So I guess the custom agents, since only one flight landed a week, the custom agents came out for that particular day. Not a VIP yet, but here's a 22-year-old John F. Kennedy passing through customs after arriving on the Dixie Clipper in 1939. Here he is again. I think he was arriving from France, which is where the Dixie Clipper flew to. But it was after he toured Europe, the Soviet Union, the Balkans, and the Middle East in preparation for his Harvard senior thesis. His father, Joseph Kennedy, was just about to be abruptly recalled as the ambassador to the court of St. James. Pan Am moved its operations to LaGuardia Airport in 3940, and the hangars were used by a few other companies, including Grumman, shown here, making wings for the Avenger aircraft in World War II and a little bit into Korea. By the late 50s and then into the 60s, the hangars changed hands several times and fell into complete disrepair. They were torn down, and it's very unlikely that the 16 acres of land will ever be used again. On a happier note, here's Manor Haven Beach, a very popular local beach for many decades. They even had fireworks on the 4th of July back in the 60s, which I remember barely. Just past Manor Haven Beach, or about where Manor Haven Beach was later built, was the Locust Grove. Located where the Capri Marina is today, Manor Haven's popular Locust Grove and its surrounding 11 acres of land offered dining, dancing, and bowling to participants and passengers from New York City and the Bronx, arriving by excursion steamships, these big paddle wheelers, at the turn of the century. This did a great business. It was a great place to come to, but I have read in a few places that the people of Port Washington and the people of Manor Haven were not crazy to have all these drunken revelers at the end of their Saturday wandering around. By 1917, Locust Grove was no longer in use. When we entered World War I, it became the ideal place for Port Washington's Home Guard to establish an encampment complete with tents and mess areas where drills and mock battles were held. Now, the North Shore Yacht Club, to quote their website, it was established in 1871 as the New York Canoe Club. It's the oldest yacht club on Long Island, ideal for people with and without a boat, unquote. The club focuses on sailing at all levels and has a very active and friendly membership. I have a few friends there, and it's a very nice place. All these different areas operated at different times to each other, of course. There was regular ferry service, which ran daily from Ben Morgan's dock in Manor Haven to New Rochelle. from about 1925 to 1935 when the Bronx Whitestone Bridge was finished. Finishing the bridge finished the ferry service. This is a metal sign which someone donated to the society in 2018. Now, Orchard Beach is a lovely little development built in the area just past Manor Haven Pool and Park. This is an elaborate brochure folded like an old road map. Remember those? But when it unfolded, it's far more than a simple brochure. We have the 24 by 36 inch original framed between two sheets of glass so that both sides can be viewed. The Kopp brothers were the owners and developers, and they hired the firm of Harry Chandler, famous in New York City, to create this sales masterpiece. I'll show you just a few of the many vignettes. Orchard Beach, Port Washington, summer and all year round bungalow colony. The text in the clip art is romantic, and to a generation of young families in the roaring 20s, it helped make home ownership seem well within reach. The only development of its kind. Summer and winter sports, private bathing beach. Port Washington, the place to live. Public, private, and parochial schools, theaters, and chain stores. Now, these views of Port Washington were there too, to tempt buyers. Although there was no date to be found anywhere on either side of this unfolded brochure, the giveaway is the photo of the new theater with 2,000 seats. It's under construction, and that's the Beacon Theater, of course, which was built in 1925, so the brochure's from about then, 1924, 1925. And as to that beach that was promised in the brochures, there was a small beach there to enjoy, but clubs and marinas were starting to be built along that waterfront. And then along came the Riviera, a tremendously popular club in the waterfront. It boasted resort-like amenities beyond this beautiful pool, including a massive marina for yachts, large and small, and a restaurant which featured world-class musical talent from all the big bands. Celebrities could be spotted most Saturday nights. It was the place to be. After several decades, times and tastes were changing, and it all came to an end when the Riviera was sold in 1975. Restaurants have come and gone on the site, but the Capri Marina is still outstanding, I'm told. I'm only going to show you, I think, 2 shots from Sands Point, because I'll be giving an entire evening's presentation titled Sands Point Known and Unknown on May 19th, as I said. This bucolic scene is undoubtedly Half Moon Beach. This pen and ink illustration by William Galloway says the Sands Point light was built in the early 1800s by Noah Mason. His amazing story, written by former trustee Lucy Davidson, can be and should be read on our website by going to Local History, People and Personalities. All the way around the other side of the point. These intrepid walkers had headed out of town, walked over Beacon Hill Road, and walked down the hill toward the beach. This is at the bottom of Shore Road, 1908. This is an aerial photograph further down the coast, showing the sand barges here, ready to be taken to the city. As many as 50 barges a day were taken from Port Washington into Manhattan. And you can see the extensive sand mining operation through here, a housing development here, and this looks like the North Hempstead Country Club. These look like golf course stand traps. So this is probably just past that. And on the ground, amidst all the trestles and the piles of sand, for more than 100 years, millions of tons of sand were dug and loaded onto sand barges. They were carted to New York City for use in concrete foundations, sidewalks, subway tunnels, and more. Here's 3 men working with their tractor crane. Thousands of immigrants came from all over Europe to work in the sand pits on both sides of the peninsula. Here are a few of them. Note the locomotive train above them. This was backbreaking work, 6 long days each week. And yes, there was a school down there, as well as housing and a general store or two. There's a wonderful little park and monument with great informational signage down there, dedicated to all those who worked and lived in the town's many sand pits. If you haven't visited, make it a point to do that in 2021. The entrance is just a bit on the Roslyn side of the stoplight that leads to the golf courses. It's outdoors with plenty of parking. We'll wind things up with 3 images of Bar Beach. This looks like it could be in the 60s, so I might even be there someplace. I don't remember a diving float, so this is probably the 40s or 50s. And these bathing suits are far older. I'm happy to take a few questions. If you type them into your chat box, Laura and Anne can pass them along to me. Thanks for your undivided attention. Please check out our website. And since we have a ton of articles, you'll probably find something of interest. Laura, turn things back over to you.
Okay, we had several comments from people who remember things. I see one from Nick Lubar saying he flew on one of those aircraft you showed from San Juan to St. Thomas in the late 1970s.
Really?
Another comment immediately after from Roberta saying there was a recent history program showing a plane taking off in Long Island Sound, and the focus of the program was on Pan Am. Clipper says the Clipper was used for planes. So yes, we know that the Clipper took off from here quite a bit. A lot of compliments for you, Chris.
We do have a question about when you think electrification came to Port Washington.
Yes.
As far as the railroad goes?
I don't know if it was
Electric
the
lights,
railroad,
maybe?
Yeah.
Well, as far as the railroad goes, it got here in 1898. I believe they electrified the entire line. I think it was 1918 or 1920. It wasn't that long. But as far as electricity in the entire town,
Yeah.
that's probably follows, Edison and the others who were doing that. Probably, I would guess the 1890s, because you see telephone lines around in some of the pictures at the turn of the century. So they had to have some kind, and you see like in this shot here, which is this grid of pictures, the lower left-hand picture, which shows the trolley basically in front of the train station. And there's plenty of telephone poles, and looks like there's, even street lights right here. So I would guess
so
around 1900.
the trolleys were electric. So
Trolley was electric, of course.
right. So you had electricity.
By 1908, absolutely. But I think it was more like 1898 also, or 1900, somewhere around there.
Any idea what the population was in the early 1900s? Somebody asked earlier.
Yeah, when the train got here, there were about, basically the turn of the century, there were about 1,200 people in town. If you go back further to, let's say, 1850, when the McKee General Store was the first store, I think there were 400 people in town. So, but once the train came in, it caused people to start thinking about commuting into the city. But of course, the train didn't go to the city. The train went to the end of Long Island, went to Long Island City. And then you had to get on a ferry, take the ferry across to the 34th Street ferry station. It wasn't until 1910 that they finished the 4 tunnels. And then you could take a train completely to Penn Station. I went through those tunnels for 32 years.
Chris, someone would like to know if there are any known surviving remnants of the old trolley network that used to run around the town.
I haven't seen anything around town. We have a book. It was the North Shore Traction Company, I believe. And one of our trustees, Ken Butner, has an original, almost like a manual that shows where they went. They went all over. They went out to Hicksville. They went to Douglaston. They had like 5 or 6 different spurs, but I've never seen anything that really that was an actual piece. And I would love to find them. I mean, a sign or a seat from one of the trolleys would be great. If you go out Port Boulevard and take that left-hand turn at the hospital and go down toward Dunkin' Donuts, that's the old Middle Neck Road. When you get almost down to 25A to Northern Boulevard, on the right-hand side, there was a huge building. I'm not sure it's still there, but there was a huge building there. It was an antique store for a while, about 15 years ago. That was one of the trolley stops where they did the repair work. And I went in there a couple times 20 years ago, looking for some sort of sign, and the guy didn't know what I was talking about. And there was no sign, except there were all kinds of, it was a very high ceiling, and it was reinforced so you could, lift engines or lift things that were in need of repair.
Yeah, it
Someone
looked
would
like an
like
old
to-
trolley barn. Yeah. Somebody is asking, did any of Howard Hughes'
Yeah.
seaplanes ever come to Port Washington?
Not that I heard of. I mean, he bought, of course, he bought Beacon Towers here. If I'm thinking of the right person, but I don't think any of his planes, he was there. I think those were on the West Coast, and his Spruce Goose, I think, can be visited in Long Beach. I think that still exists. I could be wrong there. It's been a long time since I looked into that.
Okay, someone would like to know if you can give any information in regards to the history of Sandy Hollow Road and its purpose around the time, since it was so close to Dodge House and Mill Pond.
Sure. But let me just correct myself. I said this was a Hughes thing. I'm confusing him with William Randolph Hearst, who bought this place. I'll talk about that in the Sands Point section in 2 months. Sandy Hollow Road, there's a nice picture when it was called Sand Hollow Road. Whitmer has a few shots of that, but that whole Lions Field area that is used as a ball field now, that was all sand mining. Those hills were pretty tall. I mean, if you go up Sandy Hollow Road and you look at you take a right on that road that it would take you up to Alpers. That's a big hill. Well, that big hill was all sand mined. All those houses that are, Roger Drive and all those streets over there, those were all sand mined originally, very early on in the 1870s, probably long before any of that housing development was done. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay, somebody's asking, what is on your montage? What is the third picture to the right of the trolley picture?
Third picture. Does he mean the
Yeah.
castle?
The third picture to the right is,
1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Oh, this guy. This guy?
no, I think she said yes when you said the castle.
Oh, the castle. I will be talking about that. That was a castle that was called Beacon Towers. It was built for Alva Belmont, who, after Belmont passed away, her first husband was Vanderbilt. So she was left with a ton of money, and she built castles. She had a bunch of them around the country. And this was probably the most elaborate. And she sold it to William Randolph Hearst, or it was sold to William Randolph Hearst, I think, at her passing. She was a really amazing woman, though. She is highlighted on our website under a suffragette. She funded a lot of suffragettes and was very, very active in that movement. And if you go to local history and just pull down to our local suffragettes, I don't want to credit everyone at the society, but about 4 or 5 people were putting together a beautiful series on all the local suffragettes, which we rolled out for several months. But Alva Belmont is there, and you can read about her there. She's also got a Wikipedia entry and everything, but that's Belmont Towers there. And you'll see a bunch of pictures of that, as well as floor plans in my presentation in 2 months.
And someone would like to know if you're also going to talk about the estate that became the IBM Country Club when you have your Sands Point talk in May.
Yes, that was one of the Guggenheim brothers. They had that place, IBM Country Club, and that Guggenheim, where Daniel was the one up at the where the preserve is. I'm not going to give a lot of it away, but where the IBM Country Club was a Guggenheim estate, and he was turned away. The story that I read and we have the book on this. He was turned away from one of the local golf clubs because he was Jewish. So he built his own 9-hole golf course there. And he bought the property and just basically, made himself a golf course. I don't know if that's true, but it's in a book, so maybe it is. Yeah, I'm going to talk about all the major estates and then show a bunch of houses that I'm just researching now to see who the people were, because there's a lot of postcards of people's houses when they're big mansions, but they're not names that we know. But when you look into it a little further, you say, oh, this was the guy who was the treasurer of Standard Oil or something like that. It's sort of interesting to sort of dig and try to find the history of some of these. But yes, I'll be talking about that place.
Yes, and also someone also wants to know if you'll be speaking about the Three Chimneys mansion that's now community synagogue.
Absolutely. That's the old Fleischman residence. We've got some pictures of that and a few interior pictures of that back in the Fleischman days. Beautiful, beautiful structure, beautiful grounds. Really just sort of classic.
Some interesting things in the basement of that one.
I'll bet.
Of that building. Yes.
I have not been there, but if anyone wants to introduce me, I would love to walk around that.
So Chris, one question. Does the Historical Society have any other upcoming programs?
We do, Anne. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at our events page, we have a history of cheese lecture, and it's a fun lecture. This is a woman who's an actual cheesemonger, and she gave a Zoom presentation 2 months ago on pickles. And what was the other thing, Anne?
Butter making.
Butter making. Oh, butter making. And Liz and I made the butter while we were watching the show. And a lot of people did, and it was amazing. Just to make butter in less than an hour, and the pickles were great too. So this is the same person. She's giving a cheese lecture. It's free, and just find information about it on our website. And then there's also
February 23rd. February 23rd.
February 23rd. So that's coming right up. And then we also have the guy that's going to be speaking about the history of aviation. He'll get in a lot deeper than I could possibly do. April
15th for that one.
Very good. That was a good question, Anne. Thank you.
Did we cover everything? There's some confusion right now about the date in May for the Sands Point thing. It's posted on your website as May 19th, but that's a Wednesday.
Oh.
So I think it's probably May 18th.
Yeah, yes, that would be.
They're all Tuesdays. Tuesdays. So yeah, sign up for that one. Will open up later this week. Sign up for the March 16th program is open now. So if you're inspired to sign up now, do it now. A couple questions have appeared in the chat about the video, and as soon as we can edit the video, we will be storing it on Landmark's YouTube site, and it will be available through Landmark's Facebook page and through the County Peninsula Historic Society's website.
Yes, and I'll add also that we had a little technical glitch the first time out for the mill pond, and didn't get that recorded. So I'm going to re-record that because it's only 35 minutes. So I'm going to re-record that in the next 2 weeks or so and put that on our site. So we'll have a complete collection once we start adding these, so that you can watch them again and again, or you can send them to people that you know that might have wanted to see them.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep. And they will live on the YouTube page.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as there's YouTube.
Yep.
So I think that's about it. If you have any more questions, you know where to find Chris at County Peninsula Historic Society. If you want to see upcoming programs of theirs, it's on their website. There are a lot of upcoming video programs from Landmark, both free and ticketed, and we look forward. This has been a great experience with this partnership, and we're really looking forward to more of them.
Can I add one other thing? If anyone has old Port Washington memorabilia of any kind, it could be photographs. We have a large matchbook collection of restaurants and bars and everything that here. We've got a menu collection. But anything that you might have, we have desks from Main Street School. We're interested in physical objects of any kind. So keep that in mind as you or your parents or friends are clearing out and don't know what to do with this old stuff. Always just email us. The bottom of our website has a email address, info@calnec.org, and that goes to me. So we'll be happy to talk to you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. We're going to close. This out. We will work on our technical prowess for the next time. Thank you all for your suggestions, and we'll see you in March.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
and
you.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.